Well, a very good afternoon. Welcome once again to beautiful Les Sables d'Olonne. It really is a day stolen from summer outside. It's sunny, a little bit chilly, but out on the racecourse, well, the top news, it's all about the two leaders going through this stormy low-pressure system. It's going to be 24 hours of really, really tough conditions for Charlie Dallin and Sébastien Simon. Also up in the north of this low-pressure system, well, it's also quite tough. We've spoken with the Yoann Richomme, who's just coming into it. Paul Meaha went through the front yesterday, saw 55 knots. But overall, it really is just a classic Indian Ocean, southern low-pressure train moving through. Overall, let's also just recall that with 39 boats on course, some of them still coming down into the Southern Ocean, this is going to be the biggest fleet ever in the Southern Ocean on a Vendée Globe. So my guest today, a big welcome to Simon Fisher. He needs no introduction to ocean racers. He's raced round the world 6 times on the ocean race. He's won it twice, most recently on 11th Hour. He knows the race course, and of course he also knows the boat of Sébastien Simon very well. So Sci-Fi, how are you? What do you think of this race so far?
Hi Andy, thanks for having me on. No, it's been a fascinating race so far. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching it, and yeah, personally, I've been incredibly impressed by the pace that these guys have sustained. I've had some good experience sailing on these Amoccas with a crew, and I know how hard and tough it can be, sort of sailing the speeds that they've been averaging so far. So yeah, from the comfort of my office here at home, it's been incredibly fun to watch, but also really, really impressive.
And I'd say a record-sized fleet, 39 boats in the Southern Ocean. It's going to be incredible over the next few weeks into Christmas and beyond for the next month. Yeah,
it's going to be an incredible race to watch, and yeah, I mean, at least there's safety in numbers this time down in the Southern Ocean. It's often a very lonely place when you're racing down there, so it's always good to know there's other boats around you. So I'm sure it would be with good comfort to a lot of the competitors to know that there are other people racing close by.
What does this particular phase represent in the greater scheme of things?
I mean, I think what we've seen so far is an incredibly fast-paced race, and even though it's the Vendée and a long race and the around the world race, I think the pace they've sustained so far down the Atlantic has been much more in line with what you see in the Route de Rhum or the TJV. You know, do some really, really big speeds. But right now, for all of the fleet, it is the transition into the south and all about trying to find that rhythm in the big breeze, which, you know, the guys are going to be seeing very imminently. Yeah, I think probably to sail as fast as they have done so far has been pretty taxing. So hopefully they haven't used up all their energy and they're able to get in a good rhythm as they get settled into the south.
I mean, we're talking about this low pressure. How difficult is it, or how accurate is the modelling for these low pressure systems that, in particular, Charlie and Seb Simon are trying to work their way through?
Yeah, dealing with these kind of systems can always be tough. Obviously, you get weather updated between 2 and 4 times a day, depending on the model, but things can change run to run. So something that's fairly benign can quickly develop into something much stronger. And I think we've seen certainly an element of this with this low that's coming in. On top of that, I think, you know, the guys have actually sort of sailed out the front of a lot of the weather, and the front runners have been dealing with some pretty light conditions in the sort of past 24 hours. So their options to avoid this big system that's coming in has been actually pretty tricky. So certainly for Charlie and Seb, who are at the head of the fleet, I think that their options have been limited to get out of the way. So now they've just got to kind of brace themselves for it and do their best to get through it.
Well, without over-dramatising it, what are the conditions they're likely to encounter?
Well, you look at the forecast now, and there's 50 knots forecast and in places, and also a very, very big sea state. You know, there's a forecast for 10-meter waves, and yeah, I mean, these boats, when you've got more than 25 knots, you don't really need any more wind, and anything above that becomes a handful. And you know, I think also when they're on the back of the system in the cold air, then it's likely to be quite gusty and quite squally. And with the wind being so up and down, it's often very, very tough to sort of get the right amount of sail up, get in a good rhythm and settle in. So it's certainly going to be a testing few days. It's all about kind of trying to sail a steady pace and have the boat sailing on the waves and not stopping and starting and making the pilot struggle in these conditions. So yeah, it's certainly going to be tricky, and it's going to be a test.
Indeed, Sci-Fi. We spoke with Yoann Richomme this morning, and he was just encountering the same problems as Sci-Fi's talking about, just trying to get into a rhythm and finding it very tough. And he was pretty tired when we talked to him on Paprec Arkea this morning. And how are the conditions? Look pretty tough.
Yeah, it's a bit rough. About 25 to 30 knots, and I've had a squall at 40 knots already. So I'm a bit on the lookout all the time, which is a bit tiring. But yeah, the front had some thunderstorms in it. For the guys at the back, I know they've had a rough night. It seems to have come down for me, and yeah, so no, I'm pretty tired. I need to get some rest after this interview.
Good. And is it hard to control the boat in these conditions?
No, it's not hard to control, but it's when you get, you know, like right now I've got 25 knots, so I'm doing 16 knots on boat speed, and as soon as I have 30 knots, I'm doing 25, and if there is more, I can go up to 35, you know, on a fast reach, which is not good. It's a bit too much for the boat. So it's constantly changing, and it's hard to find one setup that works.
And was it hard to make the decision to come north?
It wasn't hard at the time I made it. I didn't see really what was going to, how it was going to unfold in the south. I thought it was too risky as well, depending on where the eye of the storm would end up. I thought it'd be pretty risky, and there was no way out as well if there was edges, you know. So this early on in the race, it seemed like a bit too much for me, a bit too much of a gamble. Now I've looked at their situation. And it looks all right. If they can stay in front of the storm pretty long, it will die down a bit, and they might get off pretty well. I don't know, but you know, they're sailing in another world now.
Well, so the weather today really is all about this low pressure system, especially for the first two boats. And this is our animation today. We can see Charlie Dallin here at the front of this low pressure system, really starting to hit them and hit them hard. We're seeing gusts of 40 to 50 knots over the latter part of today and into tomorrow. That's going to be the toughest part for them. Meanwhile, up in the north, we have Yoann Richomme, the blue boat, who is repositioned up to the north. Even so for them, it's quite tough conditions. So if we play the animation forward, we'll see how Charlie and Sébastien Simon pass through the centre of the low pressure system. That means big seas and very, very unsettled conditions. So that's going to be the toughest time for them going into tomorrow. And really at the back here, when they're coming through the depression, this is a very difficult period, 40 to 50 knots in the gusts, as I say, but very, very confused seas. Meantime, watching how things play out for the boats in the north, Yoann Richomme carries on a little bit further to the north, and there's very much a classic situation coming through out of it. They're on the top corner of the low pressure system, and then as we zoom in to the weekend, coming into Friday and Saturday, you can see how the two courses converge once again. Charlie Dallin coming out of it with a lead probably of around about 200 miles ahead of Yoann Richomme as they come out of this system, and that is on Saturday. So looking now at this is looking at Clarisse Kramer and the group at the back of the low. Clarice has just dropped out of the low and into this high pressure system, now waiting for the next low, and we can see that coming for her. And we see a little bit of compression now between her, as she said in her audio call today. She's worried about the boats behind on this low pressure. We're looking at Sebastien Marcet catching up a few miles, and that's the situation for Clarice in particular, but also the group behind catching up on this low pressure system. So that is very much the weather systems for different boats, different skippers at the moment. It's all different, but I say very challenging for the boats in the front. So a difficult decision for Yoann Richomme to take Sci-Fi. I mean, I think he's kind of regretting it in some senses just now, but it's all about safety, isn't it, at this stage as well?
No, absolutely. It's a long race, and the last thing you want to do is break something in the first big storm down south. And no, I wasn't surprised to hear he's like struggling to find a rhythm. It's always very difficult in these boats when the conditions get pretty robust like they are now. All you really want is to be able to sail at a constant speed, but that's actually very, very difficult. When you go charging off down a wave and you're doing 35, 37 knots, it's not great for the boat. Everything starts to overload. It's hugely stressful, and the risk of breaking something becomes very big. So it's just so hard to find that sort of steady pace in those conditions. You'd almost rather be in a situation where you had 40 knots steady than it being 25 knots and then going to 45, because all those changes really is what makes it so difficult.
At the same time, that group up there, I think there's 7 or 8 boats in line. It's still super competitive. There's no chance to relax momentarily or try and extend your rest periods. No,
I don't think so. I think for that front group to arrive all so close into the south, they've obviously pushed themselves really, really hard to this point, and now they're seeing some pretty strong weather and not really an option to rest and recuperate too much. Obviously, they've had some lighter days in the last sort of 24, 48 hours for the front runners, but probably the stress of knowing the system's coming and checking everything and obviously battening down the hatches and getting ready has been sort of quite preoccupying as well. So it's certainly tough, and yeah, they've got some tough days to come. I'm sure everyone will be very relieved when they're sort of through the system and they're seeing the wind dropping and knowing they're through the worst of it. But that's probably only a brief respite because the Southern Ocean's pretty big, and they'll have more to come.
So if I just look at the systems we have on our routing just now, tell us what you're seeing.
Here we go. Yeah. So it's been interesting for the guys in front. I mean, they had the option to try and get north, but I don't think with the way the system's been moving that they could get north quick enough to avoid the worst of the weather, like Yoann and Jeremy Bayou and the other guys have been able to. So really, their own now, I think, or probably maybe their best option is to sail as fast as they can to sort of stay out in front of the system for as long as they can. And then hopefully they'll get a bit of a respite in the middle of the system, and the faster they can go through that section, then hopefully the more the conditions on the back of the system will subside and it'll be less windy. If they get rolled by it very quickly, they're going to see bigger wind and a bigger sea state. So almost the best thing is for them to sail fast, but that's a lot more easily said than done, to be honest, because like we've been discussing, when it does get windy, it gets hard to find a rhythm and it puts a lot of stress on the boat.
You obviously know Seb Simon's boat very well. I mean, what's its strong points in terms of wind conditions? So when we saw it breaking records, was that a surprise to you?
Well, having done a lot of miles on that boat, I know it's got a lot of potential. It's a fast boat, but I'd like incredibly impressed by Seb's performance, getting that mileage out of that boat. I know how hard it can be sailing at those speeds in that boat for that long. So I really do take my hat off to him. But to be honest, that boat it was designed specifically for the ocean race, and it's probably much more of an all-rounder boat than perhaps some of more of the sort of scow bow kind of shaped boats that you see. Actually, when the hull lines were done, it was done with going up to Asia in mind and a lot more upwind work. So but it's a quick boat. It's got a good foil package, and and we learn a lot of getting a lot of pace out of the boat with both foils down as well. So it's certainly got a lot of potential, but it's actually probably a little bit more nosedivey than some of the newer boats. So for Seb to lay down that mileage in 24 hours is deeply impressive.
And where do you think this race will be won and lost? I mean, obviously the last race we saw 5 boats finishing within a matter of hours here in Les Sables d'Olonne. Where do you think this race will be won and lost?
It's an interesting question. I mean, we've seen an incredible race down the Atlantic, and then some people talk about the Vendée, being a race down the Atlantic, and then keeping this thing in one piece across the south, and then a race back up the Atlantic. But with so many boats that are so competitive and so close together, I think the option to kind of relax into the Southern Ocean and just get through it really isn't there for this fleet, because they're all so close, pushing each other. So I think we're going to see a tough race in the Southern Ocean, and I think the boat that can A, stay in one piece, and B, maintain a good pace throughout and have enough in the tank to get up the Atlantic first is going to be the winner.
Saifa, I'll come back to you in a few seconds, but it is tough out there, and finding time to sleep and not managing to stay awake has its consequences, as Yannick Besthaven found out earlier this morning and last night.
Il y a eu pas mal de manœuvres, de changement de voile, un peu usant. Ce matin, du coup, je me suis un peu endormi avant le lever du jour. Le jour se lève à 4h du matin, 5h du matin TU ici. Et alors que je dormais paisiblement, et ben, le front m'est passé dessus. Et le bateau est parti à la bâtée. Je me suis retrouvé à l'envers, les pieds dans l'eau, le mât dans l'eau. Donc obligé de remettre tout ça droit en faisant bien attention de ne pas casser les lattes. Ça s'est plutôt bien passé. Et puis depuis ce matin, grand beau temps, donc ça c'est plutôt sympa, il fait même très bon. Et le plus compliqué maintenant c'est de faire avancer le bateau là-dedans, parce que c'est les montagnes russes, quoi. La mer elle est défoncée, pourtant elle n'est pas très grosse, elle doit y avoir 3,50 m peut-être de mer, mais dans tous les sens, et du coup il faut arriver à réguler la vitesse du bateau pour pas planter trop. J'ai renvoyé un peu de toile devant ce matin, je suis allé manœuvrer sur le pont. Mais rien que ça, déjà, faut bien s'accrocher quand même.
So all good for Yannick Besthaven in the end, but getting overtired and broaching, Sci-Fi, your thoughts?
It's good to see Yannick in good spirits. After obviously what was a pretty testing night, he looked pretty tired, and like dealing with these issues when we're racing the team's hard enough. Doing it when you're all alone is like another level. So I'm very happy to see him in good spirits. I did a little bit of sailing with Yannick and the team earlier in the year, so very happy to see them going well.
What's he like?
Great sailor, lovely guy, and hugely experienced at this sort of thing. And I think you see that experience coming through in these long races. He's another one of these guys that are impressed in this race by being steady, being in the front rudders, being in that front peloton, and going really well. So I'm sure he'll be one to watch as the race goes on.
Mentally, it's so much about managing your expectations. I think there's quite a number of sailors who came into this race with heightened expectations after the last race, and I think there's a few finding it quite tough.
Yeah, no, it is incredibly tough, and I think certainly in this race, I don't think there's ever been such a competitive front of the fleet. All these people we've been mentioning today, they're all guys with a shot at winning it, with a great boat, great programs, and plenty of experience. So I think for me, what makes this race so fascinating is there's such a good group at the front of the fleet. They're also experienced and great sailors, and I don't think there's going to be opportunity for one boat to kind of break free and then safely get it home in front of the rest of the fleet. It's going to be a battle to the very end. So as much as it is a game of physical toughness and stamina, it's a real mental chess game as well. The closer the fleet gets, then the more important all the strategic considerations become. And as you get more and more run down and things get tougher and tougher, making the right decisions also gets harder. So it really is a game of resilience.
Indeed, we spoke with Clarice Kramer on audio earlier on in the day. I mean, she's been rolling with the punches, so she's starting to drop out of this low-pressure system. But as she said, it's the way the cookie crumbles. How are the conditions? How's it been the last 24 hours?
It's been very unstable. I came out of I'm starting to be left by a low pressure system, so the wind is much calmer now, but it's very unstable, so it's a bit tiring. Well, less unstable this morning than yesterday, but yesterday was really annoying. I was never in the good setup. It was making me crazy, and that's how I lost, I think, a bit of ground compared to the small group just ahead of me, and it's a bit frustrating as a competitor, but all is good. And the weather right now is, and for the day, is calm. So I should enjoy it and maybe do a bit of work on the boat and all that.
But in these conditions, it's nice to be with a group, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice to be with a group, but I'm afraid the group with whom I is going to leave me tonight because I'm going to be ça part par devant, as we say in French. So I'm afraid I might be left by this group and be joined by the group behind me, which is super annoying. But that's the way the cookie crumbles.
That's the way the cookie crumbles. Fantastic. And tell me, how is life in the Indian compared to what it was like on the last race on this boat?
I'm afraid I don't. That's what I was wondering yesterday. I don't know how many memories I have, like precise memories of how it was. I think the problem with the foiler is the fact that a few knots of wind make a huge difference in the way the boat behaves. And so when it's unstable, it makes you even more crazy than on a daggerboard boat. But it's not super different. And the fact that it is closed, even if it's a bit sad because you don't enjoy the birds as much as on my previous boat, the fact that it is closed makes it much warmer and much easier to do all my maneuvers. So there is a good positive aspects about it.
And when the wind is up and the bad seas, you feel more safe and more secure, presumably?
Yes and no. Because it's closed, yes, but the boat, the problem is that there are moments when you can't really slow down with these boats, and I was wondering how it will be reaching in 30 knots, like how will I find the brakes, like how will I slow down? I don't know, so I will see. I think I will be able to give you an answer in a few days also how crazy those boats are when it's really windy, because downwind VMG you can always slow down, but when you have to go reaching, it's not so easy to slow down.
Sci-Fi Clarice Kramer's programme, one which was stricken by a kind of mental roller coaster, lots of problems for her, and but also a very, very compact programme run by Alex Thompson Racing. But she's coming through it all well and really enjoying her race and going well.
No, it looks like she's really found her stride this race, and yeah, it's been going really well. So no, it's encouraging to see. You know, right up there in the fight, which is great.
And a sailor you know very well out in front, Charlie Dallan. You sailed with him in 11th hour. You did some meteo work with him. He's impressive.
Yeah, Charlie's really impressed. I have to say, I haven't been too surprised, having had the pleasure of sailing with him in the transatlantic in the ocean race, and then yeah, like you say, I've been helping him a little bit with the weather preparation and the nav preparation this year, and yeah, he's a great sailor. You know, hopefully what I do can help, but
just give us a little more detail then. What do you do? I mean, obviously he's one of the masters of the meteo anyway, but what have you contributed to bolster his game?
I mean, hopefully what I can do is just take a little bit of stress out the preparation for his races for him. I obviously look at the weather, look at the routing, try and, you know, inevitably with these events, you get pulled in every direction, whether it's preparing the boat or sponsors or briefings or all of that. You know, the schedule for these guys is pretty demanding, and yeah, you can't spend as much time looking at the race as you want to. So for me, I'm looking at the weather, looking at the routing, yeah, just trying to identify all the key points in the forecast for as long as it's forecastable in a race like this, and really answer any questions he's had and dig into the details on anything that's of interest to him. So yeah, it's all about just sort of getting him as well prepared as he can and taking as much stress out of the preparation as he can. And certainly my experience with the ocean race, it's always been fantastic to have someone supporting me as a navigator. So hopefully the benefit I've got from having that, I can pass on a little bit to Charlie.
What was he like on the boat? I mean, I'd imagine a great team player as well.
Yeah, great team player. I think he really enjoyed, obviously most of his sailing is single-handed, so I think he really enjoyed sailing in company. Yeah, we actually had a fantastic leg. It was incredibly fast-paced, windy leg across the Atlantic and from Newport to Denmark. So when the conditions got tough and we had some very close racing with our competitors, it was great to see Charlie in 35 plus knots of wind, taking control of the boat, pushing it hard and getting us through the really tough stuff. It was impressive to see. So no, definitely. It hasn't surprised me at all to see when you got to put the hammer down. Charlie's often been the reference boat.
Great stuff. We'll come back to you in a few seconds, but let's have a quick reminder of how things do look out there on the Southern Ocean before we go into the ranking. This is on board with Yannick Bestaven on Maitre Coq, and this is at its best. Well, the rankings at midday today, Wednesday. And Charlie Dallan still out in front, leading by 45 miles from Sébastien Simon. Yoann Richomme about 240 miles behind, but repositioned up to the north. And he, in turn, is about 40 miles or so ahead of Thomas Rion, fifth, Jeremy Bayou, Nicol Lundven in sixth, and Sam Goodchild in seventh place in the meantime. Justin Metro in 10th, Sam Davis 11th, Boris Herrmann moving away a little bit from Clarice Kramer today. Boris in 12th, Pip Hare 17th, Isabel Joschke, Franco-German skipper in 19th, Alan Rura 22nd, Giancarlo Padotti 24th, Kojiro Shiraishi in 30th, Conrad Coleman 31st, Oliver here 33rd. So no real changes at the towards the back of the fleet. Denny van Veenberg in 37th, Ying Kun Chu in 38th, and Shabalok Sueros Shabby still in 39th and still in the South Atlantic. So that's the standings just now. Sci-Fi, what's your plans? When are we going to see you on an Amoka next?
I'm not sure.
You're available.
I don't really have any ambitions to sail on my own, but I think I'll leave that to these brave souls that are taking on the Vendée. But
TJV,
I'd be happy to return for some two-handed sailing. I think you get all the pleasure of single-handed sailing, double-handed, but without as much as the pain. So I think if there's any short-handed sailing for me, it'll be double-handed, and then obviously Ocean Race Europe and these things are next year, and it would be nice to be involved in some capacity. So watch this space, I think.
Thanks very much, Sci-Fi. A few mechanical problems out there on the racecourse. Boris Herrmann having a problem yesterday with a ram pin. They had to stop and check what happened first. There was a junction between the ram and the foil top bearing on the port side is broken. They didn't have a spare, however, they did manage to replace it, but 4 or 5 hours later, the whole system fell apart again, and Boris had to retrieve the system from inside the bilges, I think, and he had to rebuild each piece in turn. So the system is back in place, but the foil, as we understand it, is fixed in position at the moment. The other person who's had problems has been Ollie here, who had water into his engine, and this was Ollie reporting today.
Hey guys. I have a bit of a nightmare on the boat. I did all the checks today. I want to make sure the boat's ready for the Southern Ocean. And even though I haven't used the engine for about 4 days, I wanted to just quickly run the engine, make sure everything is fine. Turns out it's not fine at all. I managed to flood my engine. There's water everywhere, including in the cylinders. Therefore, when I tried to start it, I immediately blew my starter motor. So I have a spare one of spare starter motor with me, but I also had to do an oil change, and now I have to try and get the water out of the cylinder heads, and that means I am manually kind of turning over the engine. Let me show you what I set up. So I managed to get a line multiple times around my pulley, around the carabiner, and into the cockpit. As you can see, it's a proper workshop at the moment. Very messy, but it's all happening. It's all happening. Woohoo! Got an engine again! Well, that took me 4 hours. Fucking hell. I'm so glad I've got an engine again. That could have been a race stopper. but it's purring like a little cat. Perfect. Cheers.
So there we go. Sorry for Ollie here's language, but Alice, good to once again on Toot Good. It'd be good to hear. Simon Fisher, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully you'll join us over the course of the race. We've still got 60 odd days to go, and also a special thanks to Dee Kafari. I neglected to mention her yesterday. She did a great job over the past week, and she'll be with you again in about a week or 10 days' time. So that's it from the Vendée Globe Live for today. Tomorrow our guest will be Marcus Hutchison. We're going to have a little bit of a focus on Sebastian Simon, who's not so well known in the Anglo-Saxon world, and of course he is the past winner on Le Solitaire. So a little bit of an influence on that, but in the meantime a nice sunset from Conrad Coleman. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, here in Les Sables d'Olonne.